what I have found in the platform space is it's becoming incredibly aggressive and incredibly tribal. Whichever horse you back, that's the winner, and it can do no wrong. And it's developed a little bit of a cult or fanboyism process, and I feel that's damaged some of the RFP nature.
You're listening to Inside Commerce, a weekly e-commerce strategy, technology and CX focused podcast hosted by experienced digital consultants and re-platform specialists James Gedd and Paul Rogers. Get insights into e-commerce strategy, leading brands, hear from industry thought leaders and leading tech vendors with practical advice to help you improve your online CX.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Inside Commerce podcast, sponsored by Shopify. It's just me today. I'm not actually sure where James is, but he couldn't make this episode, unfortunately. But today we have a super experienced and interesting guest in Matt Parkinson from Gene. Matt's a long-term Magento and ecom specialist, and he's been in this space for a long time. We'll come on to some of the kind of innovations that have come out of Gene in the past in the Magento ecosystem and kind of how they maybe differ from some of the other partners out there. So today we're going to talk a bit about some of the newness in the Magento Adobe space and some of the things that came out of the Adobe Summit earlier this year. And also some of the things that Gene have recently invested in and kind of brought to market, both around the Adobe and Magento space, and also the affiliate space. We'll come on to that. But yeah, to start with, Matt, can you give us a bit of an intro to Gene, yourself and kind of your background in this space?
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for inviting me. It's first time you've invited me on your podcast, so
yeah,
we get that eventually.
I'm a bit lazy with it, as a lot of people know.
That's all right. I also heard long time and experience, which sounded, I just heard old when you were saying that, so we'll try. But thank you for that introduction. We've been in the Magento Adobe space since really the inception back in 2008, so whatever that is, 17 years, so a long time standing, and we've broadly built our entire professional services business around that platform and have had to navigate the various ups and downs over that period. We're primarily UK focused, but we work across the globe with a lot of international brands. Best known, I guess, in the ecosystem for building various products that are mass used. We work closely and have done for about 8 or 9 years with PayPal. So we build a lot of their Braintree, their latest PPCP and Fastlane technology. We power about 10,000 merchants globally with that. It's going back a little bit now, but we still dine out on it. 8 years ago, built the page builder technology, which made a significant difference to how Magento at the time, just before Adobe acquired it, how it was perceived and used in the marketplace. And most recently, we've built some tooling, which hopefully we'll get onto, which we branded under a new business called Bluefinch, which is trying to solve some of the challenges that the platform still has around total cost of ownership, time to market, and checkout. And that's really, I guess, our ethos in the business, trying to build elegant solutions that solve real world problems.
Great. I think we'll come on to that in a bit. I think that and kind of some of the stuff that's coming out of the community generally is a really important topic around Magento and Adobe. But the first question I've obviously just added in as well. I think both you and I have had some fairly strong views over the platform space, over where Magento sits, like how, Magento should be deployed and kind of where it's relevant in the industry. Do you want to just give us a bit of a view of kind of the state of Magento and Adobe and kind of the platform ecosystem?
We just had a really good conversation before we hit record. We should have recorded that. I think it's fair to say that Magento was a hugely dominant player 10 years ago. That landscape has massively changed. I think in the last 4 or 5 years, the new entrants into the market, there seems to be new platforms cropping up all the time, with various moves and frameworks and headless and PWA and composable and Mac and this platform's better. I do think in the last sort of 6 to 9 months, it has settled down a little bit, and there are some clear winners. Obviously, your sponsor, Shopify, has sort of trounced the D2C market globally. It's undeniable. There's been some other enterprise plays in the market. You know, the commerce tools, the Spikers, the Elastic Pass, the Fabric. It goes on and on and on. And I think it became very noisy. And what was a clear strategy for a lot of other platforms was to bash Magento because of its dominance and what have you. And understandably, Magento is not without its faults, which I'm sure we'll come on to. What I have found in the platform space is it's become incredibly aggressive and incredibly tribal. Whichever horse you back, that's the winner. And it can do no wrong. And it's developed a little bit of a cult or fanboyism process. And I feel that's damaged some of the RFP nature. And platform selection seems to be disproportionately weighted on populism rather than actually looking at fit or suitability. So I think it has reduced people's desire to do proper due diligence and understand the real nuance of each platform and whether it serves the business's purpose, rather than taking at face value what a salesperson or marketing deck says. This will solve all your problems. And I think that is starting to feed through because people have obviously experienced the newer platforms for the last year or two and found various friction points.
What do Mattel, Victoria Beckham, Sennheiser, and Glossier all have in common? They power their businesses with Shopify. Shopify is the most innovative and scaled commerce platform on the planet. It also happens to have the best converting checkout on the planet. Shopify, powering the future of enterprise commerce. Find out more at shopify.com/enterprise.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, and I think James and I have talked loads over the last kind of 6, 9, 12 months around. I think there was a period where Mac became very dominant, and over maybe a 2-year period just after COVID, a lot of people bought solutions like commerce tools based solely on what was being put in front of them. And, a lot of CTOs, CIOs, and, C-level people generally were kind of really bought into that movement. And then I think there was a pretty significant backlash as a result of like mis-selling. And I think a lot of those businesses then ended up moving more towards Shopify and maybe at the time BigCommerce as well. And I think that was definitely a part of this as well. But I do think, I think your point around, I think the platform space right now just feels very different to before, where there was kind of like a bit more respect in the market. I completely agree. Like you see so much content on LinkedIn where you've got people in the Magento space just actually bashing Shopify, but also, the Shopify people, as you share, I think Magento and Salesforce just absolutely killing them. And I think the conversation we just had before this, annoyingly, was around like, I think what's been lost in the industry is people saying, right, how do I build something for around, how we're currently operating, how our team wants to operate and the customer. And this doesn't apply to every business. I think small businesses, simple businesses, people with very little money or cash at the time, like they want to move to Shopify because it's going to be cheaper to operate. But I do think there's this whole piece where you're kind of building around, or like building IP or building around a broader requirement has probably been lost. And now that is kind of, we're going to move and operate as a platform like Shopify wants us to operate. Yeah. And I think, and what's your view on like, do you think that's where Magento still kind of, has that kind of position in the market where you do have flexibility around how orders are managed, like different kind of checkout flows and
So just to round off that last point, I would like to see much more objectivity, rather than serving personal interests from a consultant point of view or an agency point of view. And I think it would it would result in better outcomes if we knew where the skeletons were buried across all platforms. So going back to Magento, I think again, actually, I think it's probably one of the challenges that Shopify will face. Magento was effectively positioning itself to be all things to all people, from startup mom and pop shops up to huge multinational, multi-store, B2B enterprise platforms. And it's very difficult to build a platform that serves so much ICP. And I think this is broadly, Shopify struggling with their playing to B2B and enterprise space when there's a perception around that. Because you can't focus, you can't channel the efforts into particular features and functionality. So Magento suffered from that for years. It suffered from poor implementation. It suffered because it was such a high bar to get good at it. People could hack it around because it was very accessible. They had a number of missteps when they launched the Magento 2, which did even more damage. And I think fair to say with the ownership over the 15 years, from private to eBay to private equity and now to mass tech with Adobe, despite all of those stakeholders and governance, it's really lacked a cohesive roadmap or strategy of where it's going to put its innovation and investment. And I don't mind saying, I've been quite vocal about this. It's been a shame that there hasn't been the same cadence or focus to build out new feature sets and develop and enhance some of the challenges in the stack. A lot of that innovation has come from the community, and despite all of the the disruption at the strategic or leadership level, the platform still endures. Yes, it's taken a hit over the last few years, but it's still got market share that, aside from WooCommerce and Shopify, all the other platforms would give their right arm for that type of dominance. And certainly with the advances that the front end team at Hoover have done over the last 18 months, 2 years, 3 years, it's reignited a lot of enthusiasm in the open source market. And there is again, that decline is certainly leveled off in the open source Magento space and starting to uptick because there is a resurgence in enthusiasm, energy, and people are now turning, I think, back to the fact that they would like some control over their platform. They don't like necessarily the vendor lock-in around a SaaS where technology broadly dictates your decisions for the business. So I think there's a place for all of these platforms. I think it comes back down to being open and honest with the fit for your business and being clear on what you want to do. The biggest difference now is there's Magento and then there's Adobe Commerce. And previously there's been some conflation and confusion around where they sit. I think with the announcements Adobe has made around Adobe Commerce Optimizer and their SaaS platform, there is definitely a divergent now and a clear positioning and ICP that each platform sits in and where they're going on. And I think that clarifies it. What I like to position it as is that one code base with a menu option, so you can go with the traditional open source platform. We have full control. You can go with the commerce license with Adobe, but you still have the ability to control that, host it where you want. So you have the benefit of a big tech firm looking over, but you still have a lot of control. Or if your business decides you want to abdicate a lot of the ownership of that, you can go out and sign up to their full SaaS managed program. So you've got a kind of menu of options, but broadly the code base is similar.
So I think that takes us quite nicely onto one of the questions. We'll probably end up moving around a little bit here. But I think all of what you just said definitely resonates with me. I personally often cite some of this change that you just mentioned around Adobe as being a big contributor to the Shopify side? Because I think a lot of people say Shopify is just, this amazing product and they came in and changed everything. But I actually think a lot of the change in like Adobe maybe not managing some of those reputation issues particularly well, and maybe some of the stuff they're doing now was a bit late. And I think that's probably been as big a contributor to Shopify kind of soaking up market share. And I'm sure we'll come on later on around kind of the Shopify industry now and some of the risks around that. But you just mentioned Magento's SaaS play. So one of the questions, or kind of the newer SaaS offering, can you talk us through like how that works and how you see that being kind of a newer viable option for maybe where Magento maybe wouldn't have fit before?
Yeah, so it's important to again make that distinction between Adobe Commerce and Magento. So what Adobe are quite keen to do is Magento is the name given to the open source platform now, Adobe Commerce. So I think the strategically, I think it makes a lot of sense for Adobe. They've got history in the space about SaaSifying products, done it with Creative Suite. It is a nod to addressing some of the known issues with the platform, such as the total cost of ownership around patching, upgrading. It's lining the platform much more with the DX suite from Adobe. So their customer data platform, journey optimizer, analytics platform, and a lot more of their creative AI generative tools, which is the direction they're coming. So it's bringing it into the same stack so that it's much more interoperable with APIs, and they can sit much more closely together. It allows, it's got built in under a brand name called App Builder, this middleware, low code ability to integrate third-party tech and features of functionality much more in a modular managed process. So unlike Shopify, where you variable, if you're an enterprise player, you need a number 10, 20, you're better more experienced at this than I am, of apps that are outside your control in a distributed ecosystem. This is trying to bring it in so there is some standardization and control. So strategically, it makes a lot of sense. The challenge is it's quite a structural change for people that are used to Adobe Commerce. Yeah. And one of the benefits, and my concern is one of the benefits of the platform is its openness, extensibility, and the fact that last 10 years there's a lot of tech and a lot of engineering has been built. A lot of third-party providers have spent a lot of effort and resource in building integrations into the platform. That now needs to be re-engineered in this new world, which will take a lot of time. The cost and speed of building those integrations is much reduced. So it's actually, we've done it for PayPal already. It's the path is easier, fewer restrictions, fewer effort, but it's still early. And again, coming back to that honesty around consulting with brands, go, yeah, this is the direction they're going. Fast, modern take on what you know, but there is some calorie burn initially to make sure you get in that space.
Yeah, and I think like I know literally nothing about this product, and I think the industry knows very little about the product actually. And I do think it's a pretty big development, and it does have potential. Like, what's in terms of like costs? Like, is it a case of, it's similar license model and then you have potentially some benefit from a TCO perspective because you don't have that same level of like maintenance and kind of upkeep?
Correct. So I think broadly the licensing will be akin to what they currently do with the commerce, but they're bundling a lot of other features in. I think the added value, certainly the feature that we're most aware of, and I guess can see immediate benefit from, is this app builder, which is I'm not a fan of the name, because as soon as you say app builder, people go, "Oh, you're building apps." It's not about that. Actually, it is effectively a middleware, no code, low code, sort of API to API mesh, effectively. And the reason we like that is we can deploy technology and on there, whereas previously it would have to be baked into the core, or you'd actually have to use an iPaaS solution. So instantly that has allowed a lot of cost saving from people using things like iPaaS or Sligo or Tray or Hashworks. So anything out there, you can actually have that in the code. So there's instant added value in the stack. Then ultimately they're trying to remove that need for agencies or merchants to maintain the versions and the patches. So again, the cost of those upgrades, which is a clear obstacle and problem, friction point for many in the industry.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it's probably that kind of maybe bottom 50% where that has been one of the key issues with Magento or Adobe. This might be a bit of a naive question. How far along is this product? So I think they announced it at Adobe Summit. Are there live merchants using it? Is it kind of something that you're kind of seeing more and more demand for?
So this is their showcase strategy. So there's a lot of focus, a lot of investment going into this. They're accelerating that integration. Already by the end of the year, 100 to 200 integrations through the app builder network. So there is some pace going into that. They have some early adopter merchants going on it. The response from the merchants has been, we really like it. Conceptually and strategically, it's really good. Our position is that's the direction of travel. And if that's the route you want to go, great. Just be mindful that early adopters require some, early investment.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that's really interesting. It'll be interesting to see how that develops, because it feels like it's probably more in line with where Magento 2 could have been.
I think so. I think I mean, we were going to come on to this. I think you asked in one of your questions that you sent through, is this a direct play against something like a pure SaaS Shopify? I don't see it. That is certainly in response to the market conditions and the feel that, you just read any Gartner or Forrester report, SaaS. So I think it's certainly an answer to that. I think they wouldn't see going after the typical ICP that makes up the 80 or 90% install base for Shopify. That's not where Adobe plays. It is very much the large multinational enterprise with a level of complexity that's needed in the platform.
Yeah, it feels a bit more in line with maybe kind of the architecture around Centra, or potentially a bit more of a kind of feature-rich commerce tools. So kind of SaaS-based, but with the ability to still kind of build IP around it, but more flexibility around the kind of core areas of the platform.
I think so. I mean, when we were, the last couple of years, the RFPs we've been in, which tend to be the large, complex, multinational, B2B, B2C mixed platforms. The platforms on the table in that RFP tended to be the commerce tools, the Salesforce, and the Adobe. We tended not to see the big commerce and the Shopify's in those conversations. Historically, going back a year or two, commerce tools certainly had the edge in terms of the narrative and the wind behind in terms of what they were doing. But I think I was incredibly critical of the Mac ideology. I felt it was a simplistic cult. Careful. It was a simplistic view that just added unnecessary complexity over engineering for what you were doing. And I think I think this is perhaps a response to go, a platform that has a lot of robustness built into it, but now it's taking the next level in terms of newer technology and architectural decisions.
Great. Well, yeah, excited to see how that kind of plays out. So one of the other things that was announced at the Adobe Summit was the Adobe Commerce Optimizer, which again feels pretty relevant to kind of a lot of the topics we've already covered. Can you talk us through how this works and like what the kind of benefits to brands or retailers are?
Yeah, so the optimizer is one of the front end layer, and the view is this is the new front end technology that was called EDS. It's now rebadged, broadly the same sort of thing. So it's a pathway, I think, to full SaaS, because I think it's understanding that if you've invested heavily on an on-prem solution or even Adobe Commerce, what are you just simply going to shift into a SaaS product that is very early? This is a pathway that allows people to address some of one of the endemic problems about the speed and performance of Magento's front end. So it allows you to layer on the newer EDS technology, app builder onto your existing stack with a precursor of eventually that would then fold into a full SaaS. It's marketed that all of that technology can sit on other back-end platforms as well. I'm a little more skeptical of that because of, again, it's the same sort of Mac ideology that, yeah, it's all wonderful, it's just plug and play. And we know that doesn't happen, right? You can't just mash this stuff together. So I'm a little more nuanced on that as an approach. But yeah, it's a way of sort of start off decoupling some of the front end and allowing you to interface with the wider Adobe DX suite.
Yeah. So I guess that feels like it's probably an alternative approach to something that you've mentioned a couple of times, which is Hoover, which me as an outsider, in the industry, it feels like a lot of the kind of excitement around Adobe and Magento is coming from Hoover, and a lot of the agencies that are, winning net new are really kind of going to market with them. What's your view on Hoover, what they're building, and I guess do you agree that this is a big part of the play at the moment?
I think what Hoover have done is sort of thrown a bit of a lifeline to what was becoming a fairly disillusioned community. So it's a vast community of Magento developers. If we go back to the open source market, so it's less about Adobe now, it's more about the Magento open source. Bit of a disillusionment, where's it going? Where's the investment coming? All the noise and all the investment seems to be on the new shiny. And when I talked about the lack of innovation into the product, the front end was known as one of those areas that people got enormously frustrated with. It was sluggish. It took a lot of effort. You can do it, and we do it, but it does take a lot of effort, and a lot of front end developers didn't really enjoy wading through that treacle. Years ago, probably going back 2017, 18, Magento at the time, Magento Adobe, took the view that it was all about PWA, and they invested heavily in a PWA stack. Again, another hype and chasing of buzzwords rather than actually going back and keeping it simple and inherently changing the framework of the front end. Had they done that, had Hoover been an internal product, or had Hoover done it 5 or 6 years ago, I actually think the trajectory of Magento would have been completely different.
Yep.
Which is probably what we tried to do 10 years ago with the page builder technology. So they've really excited the community and enhanced that innovation and enthusiasm, and demonstrated that with the right focus and the right skills, the site can be incredibly performant and quick to build and deploy. So they've had a lot of success, and now they're taking that and building out another roadmap of features and developments. They're bringing out their own CMS page builder technology. I'm taking a few beatings that page builder's crap now, but I keep explaining it's 10 years old and no one's built anything. So they're trying to do a lot around that. A lot of fix a lot of the the annoyances and friction in the platform. And they've got a lot of love in the community. People are really advocating for it. So they've done a tremendous job doing really broadly what the owner should do. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you work with Hoover? Like, how do your team feel about it?
Yeah, we do. Again, we're working closely with them with our new product, Bluefinch, which again, it's similar sort of mission and vision, trying to solve problems that people use. Hoover is a really good, quick framework to build on, and we put that in our selection, whether it be the Adobe EDS platform, the Hoover platform, still the incumbent Luma platform. So again, it comes down to cost fit rather than being polarized and just going, that's the route.
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense. And then I guess the next question, so we have covered this a little bit, and this question was maybe a little bit more focused around the future for Adobe and Magento, but I think we've covered a lot of that. So like I guess my question is like TAM, the market for Magento, where people actively want and need Magento or Adobe, which to me feels at the moment fairly like complex B2C, multi-brand, people that, have IP that is very important within a build or B2B. How do you see that market? Do you think Magento or Adobe's products will ever be mass market again? Or do you see them focusing more on that kind of enterprise and B2B category?
Yeah, I think the days of complete mass market are gone. I think the Adobe is their traditional customers are huge, global billion-dollar businesses in terms of the DX suite, and it's about building commerce capability into that. So I think there is a very clear, certainly in our view, is a very clear lane and fit for businesses that, as you rightly point out, there is a level of complexity. There is a desire to have control over checkout, control over data, control over business logic. Yeah. Because that does de-risk, and I think there will be a pushback on that vendor lock-in from Shopify, and I think they will challenge to nail that enterprise space. Data governance, data integrity, for one. They've yet to, despite 3 years of saying, yes, we do multi-store, yet to really nail that. I don't think I think that's a marketing. I don't think that hits the right nail. And B2B still, there's some promise in terms of the feature set, but it's still not on parity. And whilst Adobe still has some holes in its B2B capability, the fact that it is an open architecture and it allows us to build whatever the business wants, that's still for us, that's why we've resisted the urge of going into the Shopify world. And the type of businesses we look for are the ones that we call it level 5 commerce. It's about differentiation. And, we've got a really, really powerful subscription-based business we've looked after for 7 years, and they've invested so heavily in making sure that their technology serves their customers, and they're a unique customer set. It's in healthcare, adult healthcare as well, really sensitive to how they want to operate. And the work we've done around, well, there you go. Thank you. 7-8 years ago. Amazing. Still with us. The stuff they've done around lifetime value, churn rate, the user journey, is phenomenal. They're really on it, and there's no constraints. If you took an app off you just wouldn't be able to do that without a ridiculous amount of API workarounds. So it's there's that space for businesses and that differentiation.
They're also multi-brand as well, and I don't know if it's still managed in the same way, but they have multiple brands operating from individual instances of Adobe or Magento. I think that's another area that Shopify and a number of the other platforms aren't really.
And international as well. And it allows us to do a level of orchestration on payments as well. It just gives us that freedom to make the right decision for the business rather than going, okay, you want to do this, here's that. Does that fit?
Yeah. I think in terms of those Shopify areas, I think markets gets better all the time, but I agree that and I think anyone listening to this would agree that there's still areas that need to be invested in and worked on, and also the compatibility with the ecosystem, and maybe some of the more kind of trading focused areas aren't there. It's a work in progress. I think they'll definitely get there. I think B2B, I think Shopify have obviously got an incredible brand. They're very good at marketing, but I think I'm still to be convinced that, that they have the plan to actually compete with the proper B2B platforms than the Adobes and some of the others that are, actively serving B2B retailers doing billions and billions of dollars with the complexity. And I feel like sometimes they'll come out and they will say that they're ready to go after that market, but it doesn't quite feel like they've got that same energy behind that one as they do some of the other categories that I think they're going after. So I think I agree on that one. It's
a phenomenal platform. I said it makes the easy stuff really easy, but it makes the hard stuff really hard.
Yeah, and the mission, ultimately, the mission for Shopify is there's no barrier to entry. I think Shopify becomes, what Microsoft was or Windows was, and they want to be, a default operating system, and then they figure out how they maybe monetize it and also leverage the data. And I think, the real vision for Shopify is to go head to head with some of the biggest companies in the world from a data perspective, alongside the enterprise play, which I think has a bit of a different orientation, and, they need to bring in volume on that side. But, I think that's ultimately where it's heading. And I think, it's going to definitely have an impact on their ecosystem, the service industry. But I feel like that vision doesn't necessarily tie into like a business that's built a way of working from scratch that does hundreds and hundreds of thousands of orders with crazy complexity. So I think it'd be interesting to see how that side progresses.
Does any of it matter though, Paul? Does any of it matter? 3 years, you'll just be buying off ChatGPT, won't we?
Well, that's kind of, I mean, I think there's obviously a lot of question marks over what e-com's going to look like in 2 or 3 years anyway, and what those, kind of experiences look like. So, I don't think anyone really fully knows the speed at which some of that stuff's going to affect us all. So next one. So Gene's always been at the forefront of innovation in the Magento or Adobe space. So I've seen various different products you've done, from like VR related things to payments. Bluefinch was obviously the highest profile one. So you've got 2 new products. So to start with, can you talk us through Bluefinch, like exactly what that is? What the kind of strategy is, what the benefit is to a merchant, and kind of how far you want to take that.
So we were inspired broadly by what the guys at Hoover had done. So they demonstrated that there was still an appetite and still a market there. Despite the decline, there's still a good 200,000 user base out there that we know of, let alone that we don't know of. And I think it was a little bit of a response to the onslaught from Shopify. The ammunition they had, rightly so, was total cost of ownership, right? The cost of upkeep and the patching, the time to market it takes, and the effort to spin up a site, and also the checkout. The optimized checkout, and the known challenges around the endemic product with Magento. So we thought, okay, well, Hoover solved the front end. Can we go about solving some of these other challenges? So if we took them in isolation, so the total cost of ownership really comes down to the disproportionate amount of money you have to spend on patching and upgrading the platform, and the challenge around that. And there's many reasons why it does cost that, but it didn't need to be that. So for the last 3 or 4 years, that hasn't been a problem for us as an agency or our clients. So optimizing the code. So we took the view as let's package up some of that learning, tooling, coding, and put it onto a platform, a SaaS platform that any merchant can now connect to, and it will validate, manage, interrogate your code, and go through a load of checks and spit out compatible pull request within about 2 minutes. And if there are compatibility issues or problems with it, what it will do is highlight where those are, what you need to do. 99% of the time, they're to do with some third-party module or extension. So it's the first time ever that we're going to be able to surface up and not necessarily name and shame, but certainly shine a light on the culprits and take the criticism away from the platform and the agency that has to do this. And it allows the business to go, because often they're blind to why it costs this much. So suddenly when you run this report, the business or the merchant can go, well, I've got all green ticks. Surely it shouldn't cost anything. We can just go live, similar to you do with Shopify or WordPress, sort of green and blue deployment. The real test came back in beginning of April when Adobe released a load of updates and patches and upgrades, usual scheduling, and we passed that through 30 sites within 2 to 3 minutes. The only thing that slowed us down was actually the release from Adobe of those patches. Now that effort, even if you had really good code and really good clean, simple sites, would still take 4 or 5 hours, maybe even a day per site. So suddenly we've gone 30 days there in 2 minutes. You can go in and just pull request. So huge amount of saving. Huge amount of effort in that. So that's a really exciting. I think product the market's been crying out for donkey's years. My only annoyance is that we didn't do it five years ago.
So I feel like, and I guess the goal is if you get the volume, then you end up with a lot of data around this stuff, and you can apply like AI to it and everything else. Feels like kind of like Hoover have always had like a bit of a proposition around that, but it's obviously been meant that you need to use their hosting service and everything else. And I guess like how accessible is it, like from a cost perspective? Like presumably you charge for this service. How does that work?
We do. I think it works out about I think $50 per site just to run the process, the pull request. So if you say, look, best case scenario is going to take you 5 hours, it's really affordable. And what we want to do is put it out there mass market to levy up the community and take all that criticism away from it, encourage people to actually patch and upgrade, because then that has a bearing on the security aspect and the security holes that generally come about because people don't patch it because they can't afford it. So there's a lot of a peripheral benefit of improving the standards of the coding. And every time you use the tool, it iterates and your platform gets better and better because you basically wash through any crap code, legacy code, and you wash out any modules that are defunct or not keeping pace with it, and it really cleans up the ecosystem.
I guess the friction, it also removes friction, which I think has probably been one of the biggest issues as well around Adobe. Like all of these kind of patches and everything else, there's usually someone on the other end getting frustrated or having an impact.
But it slows people's ability to move ahead with their roadmap because everything stops because a patch comes out and you have to divert resource and effort to do that. So that it's compounded impact. And I think our view, we did it as an agency. We wanted to remove that from consideration. So I don't see it. Our merchants don't see it. It's just a line item in support. It just happens. And that means they can carry on, concentrate on the CapEx, roadmap, feature development.
Makes sense. And then the other new product that you've developed, which when we last met, I was pretty surprised at like how far along you are with it and like some of the relationships that you've built with global kind of publishers and media companies. Can Can you talk us through that? I've actually forgotten the name of it and I haven't written it down. So yeah, could you talk us through that?
Take note. You will hear it a lot. ShopThru. The ShopThru is a carve out business from Gene. So this is a new startup. Well, I say new. It's been just over 12 months now where we've been developing the platform, validating, doing a lot of market fit. It came about, I guess, probably 3 or 4 years ago with a vision that could see the way the world was going from an e-commerce point of view, in that for the last 20 years, nothing's really changed. We direct everybody to a website. Oh, is that you? See, even the screen thinks it's good. Yeah. Directs everyone to a website, redirects everyone to a website, irrespective of what channel you're on. And I had a view that eventually it's going to be kind of a channel-less world, and actually people will need to be buying wherever they are in context, wherever they discover a product, so the buy anything anywhere sort of concept. And that kind of got born around when I started thinking about the AR technology, or the conversational commerce, IoT. So all that seems quite old hat now, seeing as everyone's talking just about chat and AI. But broadly, that's kind of aligned with where a lot of the conversations now are going with agents, and the buzzword now, which is agentic commerce, and it's that vision. So we set about how can this work, and it was really taking the idea of, rather than directing someone to a retailer, why don't we bring the checkout to the consumer wherever they are? So in sort of traditional terms, it's about an embedded buying experience wherever you are. Now that has lots of benefits from a tracking cookie issue, so you don't have all that nonsense. Building convenience to the consumer, speed, fewer steps, all the friction, addresses the checkout conversion, abandonment rate, and that was really where we honed on it. And we found in the last 12 months that there is a natural fit into the affiliate marketing world at the moment. And when we started doing a lot of market research, in this world, we uncovered so many problems, so many challenges that industry faces, with quite a legacy concept of redirection, and facing more and more increasing challenges with the advent of AI, with the advent of loads more ad tech. And one of the standout data points we found was just how much money is misappropriated to that last click touch point, with the main culprits being voucher code websites, cashback websites. And when we started talking to the content creators and publishers, they were kind of aware that it was happening, but to not the extent. And when we started looking into it, it's huge. So these guys, these publishers, big publishers, content creators, put all that effort into curating, generating that content. And at the best guess, half of that traffic is effectively we use the provocative term hijacked at that last click, that last moment. And these guys that are doing the hard lifting aren't getting any benefit. So our solution, by flipping this on its head, puts the power back into those guys' hands and go, okay, you can now get proper recompense for the effort and work you put into generating that content and driving the intent for the sale rather than the closing of the sale.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think, I agree on the affiliate space, and there's so much misattributed commission in that world, like even earlier on in the process as well. Feels very topical as well, obviously, with AI and Google and GPT both announcing a level of kind of in context checkout. So I guess this would be the equivalent, but via editorial sides, because I think people still consume editorial content, and I guess the same could apply to video and whatever else.
Yes.
Yeah. So how does a commercial model work? So it feels like at the moment you're probably working more with publishers than directly with brands and maybe networks. How does it work?
Yeah. So I think if you're if you're being cynical, you could argue that we are also a network, putting retailers in touch with publishers, content creators.
Yeah, it's a good point, actually. Yeah.
However, we are trying to solve the problem for the originators, the intent, first and foremost, because they're the ones that are being, I guess, most acutely affected by the attribution. And actually, as an industry and a sector, I think they are staring down the barrel of another seismic shift over the next couple of years. I was fortunate enough last week to be at the PayPal C360 event. It's a sort of 2 or 3 day sort of leadership away day where you get a lot of access to what they're doing internally and some amazing speakers. So we had that class from OpenAI, Perplexity there because they announced their Perplexity tie-up and the work that's going into agentic commerce. So you can see where the world is moving, and what we've done is built the rails that would enable not only that to happen, but actually still monetize it for the people that are generating the content. And I think there will be a desire for authenticity, and that will come from content creators and publishers. So we've been very fortunate that the engagement for the publishing network, the big newspapers, big magazines, have seen this as a need, and they've really jumped on board with solving the problem. Because the money exists on the table, we're just basically saying, well, it's now due to you. So it can change their bottom line overnight by implementing this technology. The retailers have been great, because we're solving that problem for publishers. They're therefore more likely to promote retailers in our network. So we've got about 150 Shopify merchants, actually, you'd be pleased to know, that have already joined our network. So we've got quite we've accelerated that quite a lot. We're still early, but early signals have been amazing on the conversion and the attribution. So we're really pleased and quite confident where this can go in the next 6 to 12 months.
Great. Yeah, it's super interesting. We'll have to at some point get you back to do an episode maybe on this specifically, because I think
I would.
Yeah, it feels like there's a lot of potential there, and potential, I guess, for you guys to work more with the other networks and obviously kind of broaden it out. And there's a lot of data available there that I'm sure we could talk about for ages.
The benefit of I'd love to. We're going to release a white paper next week, which is a whole research piece of what we've done. The benefit for retailers is because we can now surface up exclusive offers and deals in a closed environment. So often retailers are reluctant to put out the codes because they get then widespread coverage over the aggregators online. Whereas now, for the first time, retailers will know which publishers are promoting them and driving them the actual sale traffic, and therefore can negotiate with them better deals because they know it's in that closed environment, the anonymized coupons, basically.
Great. Well, I look forward to reading the white paper. This has been a great discussion. Obviously, we've covered a lot, and a few different kind of areas. If people want to get in touch around the Gene kind of Adobe Magento side or the ShopThru side, how can they get in touch with you?
Wow. Matt, M-A-T-T, at gene.co.uk. I'll answer any questions. Or have a look on the LinkedIn profile.
Perfect. And really appreciate you coming on. Like I say, it's always interesting talking to you. I think the Magento Adobe discussion will be really interesting to a lot of people, and it feels quite topical again at the moment. And as always, thanks everyone for listening. If you've got any questions, feel free to reach out to Matt or James or I, and we can connect you. And as always, please follow or subscribe to Inside Commerce to help us keep growing. James is a lot better at that kind of exit piece. But thanks everyone for listening.
You're listening to the Inside Commerce podcast hosted by experienced consultants James Gerd and Paul Rogers. Inside Commerce is your fast track to digital knowledge, featuring interviews with leading e-commerce retailers, industry thought leaders, and the C-suite of key tech companies to explore the latest in digital strategy, customer experience, and tech. discover what the latest trends really mean, and get practical advice based on experience to help fine-tune your e-com strategy and tech stack. Follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to James or Paul if you'd like to discuss an e-commerce project. We hope you enjoy the latest episode.